there's that you know, words running across the bottom of the screen because they got the audio turned down. So pretty much all of us have seen that. Well, audio description is to people who are blind what captioning is to people who are deaf. It's providing information that they would not otherwise be able to access. You probably are familiar with one form of it. So ever hear a sports broadcast on the radio? There was a TV blackout, you know, you couldn't get to the game, so you're listening to the radio, right? Well, that's just audio description. I mean, those broadcasters are providing information, visual information to you who can't be there to see it. So it's the same sort of principle. That's exactly what we're doing. I'd like to start out sort of with an example. So let's go to the movies. So let's pretend you're blind, you can't see. You got a buddy and the two of you decide to go to the movies for the afternoon, whatever. So this is what that experience is like for you as a blind person, right? This is a 30-second clip from Justice League because I've always been sort of a DC comic kind of fan. And this is what you would experience that 30 seconds like.
I'm asking for help.
So pretty gripping, huh? Yeah. So you're sitting there going, nudging your buddy in the ribs. What's going on? What's going on? Huh? You know, that's a long 30 seconds, isn't it? It's only 30 seconds. It seemed like it went on forever, right? Okay, this is that same clip with audio description.
Elsewhere, a lone figure on horseback rides across the snow-dusted crest of mountains in the distance. Later, the figure pops away from his horse, trekking along uneven rocks to the edge of a steep cliff beside a narrow waterfall. Pushing up a pair of goggles from his somber face, Bruce Wayne chases down the steep drop at a coastal village far below. Now he addresses a group of villagers inside a meeting hall. I'm asking for your help.
Okay, so that one kind of made more sense, right? Yeah, big difference there. And just for completeness, whoops, come on. Just for completeness, this is what your friend saw who can actually see the video. So this will let you judge how accurate that audio description was.
I'm asking for your help.
So that's what your friend saw. So not bad. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but at least you know what's going on. Anybody see the waterfall? I never knew there was a waterfall in that scene until I listened to the audio description. If you just listen to the audio, you can hear it. But visually, you know, you're focused on the figure of Bruce Wayne. You don't see the waterfall. But the audio describer picked that up and knew that whoever was blind and only listening to the audio would want to know what that noise was. So that's the kind of detail that kind of goes into audio description, to being aware of those little things. So let me just touch on history a little bit. This is a very new field, actually. Sort of developed independently on the East Coast and the West Coast without any collaboration to begin with. So in the East, there was a guy called Chet Avery who was in DC. who is blind, he had this idea in the 60s that, maybe there would be a way of communicating this sort of information. So he talked here and there and yonder, trying to get some interest. It took him a long time, but then he found a couple called the Fan Steels, who had started this organization called Washington Ear, which was a reading service. So you probably have heard of reading service for the blind, where you could dial in and they would read the newspaper or other things to people. And so he interested the Fan Steels in it, and then in 1981 actually was their first performance. They started doing audio description for live theater. So we'll talk more about that later. On the West Coast, now another guy, totally independent, had no idea what was going on the East Coast. He was in San Francisco, and he started thinking about audio description for TV and for films in the 70s. And that came about because he had a friend over, for the afternoon, and his friend's blind, and they decided to watch High Noon. And so just right off the cuff, he started slipping in little bits of description in between the dialogue for his friend there as they're watching this movie. And after that, he started thinking, well, why can't we do this for everybody? Why can't we broadcast it for television? Why can't we add it to movies? So he started the movement out on the West Coast to do this. It started gathering a little bit of steam in the 80s, through the 80s and in the 90s. Got a big push, actually, from my standpoint, in 98, when Congress added what's called Section 508 to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And Section 508 requires federal agencies to make electronic and information technology accessible. So that would include websites as well as the touchscreen kiosks. So that's kind of where I got all involved. And it's grown from there. So people have become much more conscious of the need for audio description and how do we make these things accessible to everybody. Interesting little snippet. The UK leads the world in a number of venues that offer audio description. And that's across kind of all fields: live performances, DVDs, films, whatever. I really don't know much about the history in the UK, but they're ahead of us. We're still playing catch up. We're getting better though. DVDs and movies performances are offering. So that bit I played for you was off the DVD that I own of Justice League. And so you can check if you get, if you've got new DVDs or even streaming options. If you go to the language menu, where it lets you select different languages and turn on captioning and stuff, you'll probably hopefully see an option that's called descriptive audio description. And if you turn that on, you're going to get the audio description version playing. So it's improving the number of DVDs or movies that offer that. So audio description, providing information about what you can't, visual information that you can't see. And there's a lot of areas in which you can do that, right? So you've got movies, you've got television, you've got live performances, which is a whole field in itself. And you're talking theater, dance. Think about dance. Dance is an entirely visual experience, right? I mean, you've got the music, but other than that, the whole purpose of dance is to see it. So that's a challenge. How do you describe that to someone who can't see it? Opera, of course, is just the same as theater. And let me do a shout out right here to a group called Arts Access, which is a group over there in Raleigh. They're a nonprofit and they provide audio description. They do, I think, a lot of live performances is probably where their main niche is. I have personally don't have any contact with them. I haven't worked with them at all. You know, they were received a award a few years ago from the American Council of the Year for providing this. So we do have that available right here in the Triangle, and they have volunteer opportunities and offer training. So if anybody's interested in into the field, that's one way to do that. And I noticed recently I was fortunate enough to be able to get tickets for Hamilton coming up in May. Sat there at 10 o'clock and got my tickets. But I noticed when I was online, they offer DPAC is offering 3 special accessible performances. One, they will have American Sign Language, one will have captioning, and one will have audio description. So there is that opportunity here in the Triangle for audio description. I don't know about movies, but certainly there is some live opportunities for that. And another example or field area where audio description is used and becoming more prevalent is museums and exhibits. And this is my niche because I'm doing primarily exhibits. But any kind of museum can offer an audio description tour, which is, it's a different flavor. I mean, a lot of museums have audio tours, right? You rent the little device or the cassette or the stream it or whatever and walk around and get some information. Audio description tour is going to be similar, but the focus is different. An audio tour is going to be interpretive. It's going to explain what you're looking at, the meaning and the background and that sort of thing. Audio description is pretty much what you're seeing. It's description, not interpretation. So it's going to be a different slant there. And let me say something then specifically about my work. As Marie said in the introduction, I primarily work for the National Park Service as a contractor, and focused on exhibits that are in the visitor center. So if you go to a park, you could stop at the visitor center, and pick up your information, your little map, your brochure, whatever. And there'll be exhibits there, and you can wander around and look at the graphic panels, and sometimes they'll have display cases with, artifacts, historical artifacts or rock samples, or depending upon the park, whatever's appropriate. So the Park Service now, especially since the late 90s, anytime they build new exhibits, they will create an audio description tour of that exhibit. And they're very good park films. They have the little theater and you go watch the little film about the park. All of that now is captioned. It will all be open captioned, and the film will be audio described as well. Audio description is a little different than captioning. In the captioning, you just put it up there and anybody can see it. It doesn't really interfere with anything else. Audio description, you have to have some mechanism whereby you get it to the consumer, to the visitor. And what the Park Service is going to now, there used to be all sorts of little handheld devices, and some of them were rather cumbersome. It said push 1, 2, 3 to get here about this exhibit, walk over here. Now you got to push 8, 9, 10. And it was fairly cumbersome. What they're going to now are iPhone apps. And it is actually only on iPhone at the moment for the Park Service. But it runs on your iPhone. Or they have devices there at the desk. So if you don't have it or haven't downloaded the program to your app, to your phone, you can pick up a device there at the visitor center, at the desk, and earbuds. And they're triggered as you walk through the exhibits. They're triggered by little, I can show you one actually. Bluetooth devices, which are, they're called iBeacons. And they're just a little disc, look like that, very small little thing, but they put out a little signal. So, like Bluetooth, just like your Bluetooth, earbuds work with your phone. As you come close to this, your phone will vibrate to let you know that you're near an exhibit. And then that menu that you see on the on the right of the screen is what will pop up on your phone. All right. So supposedly the exhibit that is closest to your location, because of the little Bluetooth devices, will be at the top of that menu. So you can select that, and then it gives you the description. And you're going, yeah, but it's an iPhone. How do blind people work an iPhone menu? Well, that's one reason it's on iOS only, and that's because Apple, kudos to Apple, they have done a really good job. I mean, they've really made a focus of making iPhones accessible to people within all sorts of limitations. So with people who can't see, who can't hear, who have, mobility issues. So iPhone's done a really good job. And there's something called VoiceOver. If you go to your iPhone under settings, under accessibility, you can turn all sorts of little different things on. And one of the features is called VoiceOver, which means as you run your finger over the screen, anything you touch, Siri will read it to you. So if I go down this menu list and I touch that first one, she will say entry button. Well, it's a button. So if you then select it, then it takes you to the next screen with the text. And if you touch this text, then she reads you that text. The little arrow in the top, you run your finger up there and she says back button. So it lets you go back. So a lot of blind people have iPhones and they're familiar with this technology, so they can download the program before they go to the park, and they're all set to use this, and they're familiar with the technology and know how to use it. Because if you don't know how to use it, it's tricky. For us sighted people, if you turn that VoiceOver on, if you have an iPhone, it'll be fun to play, or it'll be frustrating actually if you try to play with it, because now if you just touch something, it reads it to you, it doesn't select it. So, well, how do I select it? I touched it. So that's a whole challenge in itself. I won't teach you how to do that right now, but it's fun to play with if you haven't ever done so. So that's for the interiors, triggered by these little Bluetooth devices as they walk through the exhibit. Basically what I do is I come into this area and I say, okay, this area has 3 graphic panels and they're titled blah, blah, and blah. And in front of you is a display case with some artifacts pertaining to blah. And then if you want more details, select from the menu. And if they go to the menu, then it lets them select the individual panels, which will then describe what pictures are on the panel and read the text to them from that panel. So if somebody's walking through the visitor center, then they can choose what they're interested in. It's unlike the old recorded tours where you had to listen to everything as you were, going through. But now you can select the topics that you're interested in. I preface each description with the number of words that are in that description, so they can decide how interested they are. If they are looking at, normally we try to keep it 450 words, which is 3 minutes at a normal speaking rate, because that's about as long as you want to sit in front of a panel and look at it, right? But that lets them decide. They go, am I really interested? And if they get, into it for 30 seconds, decide, no, this is not what I want, they know that they can just go on from there. The other thing I'll mention about the iOS is that they have control over how fast Siri reads that material to them. And a lot of people who are blind can speed listen. We can speed read and skim stuff. They can speed listen. So they'll go to those settings and turn up that speaking rate, bump it up to a point where you and I could only pick up 1 word in 10. But because they're audio focused and they have it, they're practiced at it, they can listen to material spoken very quickly and still get the information. Park also has an outside app, and this is for anybody. You can go to, do a search for it, NPS. The outside app is both iOS and Android. So if you have an Android, you can get the outside app as well. And it has audio description option. You can go into that app and turn on audio description. So it will describe exterior sites as well. I've just sent off a script to Independence National Historical Park in Philadelphia, where I was describing all of the exteriors of the buildings there, Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell Center that holds the Liberty Bell and the Visitor Center, all of those buildings. So that will be incorporated then into the exterior park-wide app, and anybody who needs audio description can turn that on and have that available to them. So I just kind of in closing here want to talk a little bit about some of the nuances of audio description. It is purely description. Like I say, you're just trying to convey that visual information that they're not getting. You're not trying to explain it or interpret it. And you really want to describe it, not to label it. But that, so what do I mean by that? So if I'm describing a picture, say, of a soldier, instead of saying, here's a soldier, what I would say is, here's a man or a woman. They're dressed in clothes that are camouflaged and have blotchy colors all over them. They've got a U.S. flag patch on their shoulder. They're holding an automatic weapon, so that the listener then can say, oh, that's a soldier. So I'm not trying to spoon feed the information. I'm giving them, because that's what your brain does, right? You look at that person and go, oh, that's a soldier, because your brain takes in all those details and makes that conclusion. So ideally, you want to do that same thing for someone who's blind. Give them the information and let their brain go, oh, yeah, that's a soldier. This really, though, is an art, not a cut and dried thing, because we're limited in time. Like I said earlier, if I'm describing a panel, I try to keep it to 450 words. Well, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And I don't have the luxury of doing 1,000 words. And if I'm doing a graphic panel that's got like maybe 3 pictures on it, plus a couple of 100 words of text, I'm really limited in what I can do. So sometimes I cheat, and sometimes I have to label and not describe, but I try to adhere to that as much as possible. Like I say, it's kind of technical, and that makes it, sometimes I think it's almost like poetry, because you're really trying to use just the fewest words you can to convey that information, to convey maybe a feeling or something. So I think about it like haiku. Haiku is very regimented. You've only got these many words to convey this idea or this thought or this image. And that's what we're trying to do in audio description, is limit those words, but still get the meaning across, the important thing across. Convey that feel, and it's a challenge. I learn all the time, and hopefully I'm getting better all the time. It's certainly more efficient, but it really is, and it's evolving field too. I've been fortunate enough to be in workshops where some of the participants have been blind, which is really great, because we do a little exercise and describe something, and then we'd all turn around and say, so Joey, how did we do? Did that make sense? Did it work? One thing people ask me a lot about is color. Does color mean anything to somebody who's blind? So that's a question we've put to people in workshops. Turn around and say, well, Joey, does it make sense for us to say this is red or blue? And the feedback I get is, yes, it does make sense, because even though if they've been blind from birth, they have no idea what that is. But actually, out of that whole population of people who are blind or just have low vision, not all of, a small percentage have been blind from birth. Most people have lost their vision somewhere along the way, so they do have some memory of color. Or another user who might need audio description is not completely blind in that they have no vision whatsoever. They just have macular degeneration or cataracts or some other sort of physical something going on that limits what they can see. Maybe it's just a blur, but they're still getting color. So color means something. And even if you've been blind from birth, what I've been told by one woman was that it's meaningful because colors have emotive or social meanings. You know, you think about green money or green jealousy, red hot anger, red fire. So colors have associations that she felt was important to convey. So all those things kind of go into the whole thing, trying to get that across. And I think that pretty much sums up what I'm trying to say. So let me open it up, I think, at this point for some questions. What piques your interest here?
Could you stop your share, please, Carol? There you go. Perfect.
So I covered it all. You guys know about it now.
Well, Carol, thank you. I'll jump in. I want to thank you for sharing this, and I find your work really fascinating. A few questions came to mind as you were talking. So one is obviously the National Park Service has made a real emphasis, and I'm wondering what kind of feedback you've gotten from folks who are now experiencing these systems, and I'm wondering too if it's actually resulted in an increase in attendance, by people who are visually impaired or blind as a result of the initiative. Do they have a sense of that?
I don't think they do, Rod. Sometimes I feel like I'm kind of blowing in the wind here. To be honest, the park is providing the service, but I don't know that they're always making it known that they have the service and that people can't take advantage of it. And I know, and I'm sure some parks aren't training their rangers. So if somebody comes in and says, I understand you have an audio description tour, the ranger will go, blank look, or they forgot to charge the device and they can't do it. So I don't think it's being used. I'm sure it's not being used as much as it could be used, and that people aren't aware of that. So it needs to be better advertised that this is available. The great thing, though, about now moving to the iPhone platform is that people can learn about it ahead of time. When they're going to the website, they can find out that it's available and they can download it before they come. Yeah. So I think that's going to increase that usage quite a bit.
That's great. That's helpful. Thank you, Carol. I see Jide has a question.
Yes, Jide.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I mean, it's a new part of understanding for me. I've only been used to captioning before. Now I'm hearing of AD, which is actually interesting. So when you were presenting, in my head, I could picture myself going to the movies with my blind friend, and then we have close like 100 people in the movies, and maybe we have 2 blind people. So in my head, how is it going to probably catch up with the AD? I mean, is it going to be an app with his own phone or an application with the Durham public service where the movies is situated? I'm just trying to picture how that's going to work.
Yeah, great question for the movies and for theater as well, for live performances. And basically what happens is they have to get a headset from the office. So this is broadcast, it's an RF, usually an RF broadcast through the theater or through the movie theater, so that only people who have the headset will be picking up that extra channel of description. I didn't say when I was talking about live performances, obviously you don't want somebody there in the audience talking into this microphone to tell you what's going on. So the person who's actually doing the description, and it is done live, somebody there talking as the production goes on, they will either be up in the sound booth, so they're not disturbing people in the audience, or they use what's called an stenographer's mask, which puts over your nose and mouth and lets you talk into it and muffles your sound, so you're not disturbing the people around it. But then it gets broadcast out to the people who have the headsets. So that's how it's generally done. And a lot of times the headsets are just one ear, so that they can hear with the other ear what's going on the screen, and this ear is then giving them the audio description.
Thank you very much for that. That's sinks more with me.
Yeah.
Melissa has her hand up. Thank you.
Melissa.
Hi, Carol. Thank you so much for giving this presentation, because it's a whole avenue of social justice that we don't usually
Mhm.
even think about at all.
Mhm.
And I find it so valuable to hear about this. And so my question has to do with whether or not people who are not able to see are aware of this whole new dimension of access that is being made available. And kind of in particular, I was wondering, are there schools for the blind or agencies that cater to people who can't see, at which advertisements are made? And then I was wondering, for instance, if the national park, I was just thinking, this is so cool, because people who are blind, how did they even get to the park? Now they could see the park from their own home,
Mhm.
right? And
Yep.
so is there a national park website that is accessible by those who are blind, that they could go and they could visit Niagara Falls or whatever?
Yeah, I'm sure, to be honest, I haven't looked at the NPS site to see if it is accessible, but I'm sure it must be. Section 508 requires that information technology be accessible. So I'm sure by now the Park Service has addressed those issues so that screen readers can deal with the Park Service's website, and that all the images have alt descriptions, right? So that lets you understand what the pictures are. I haven't checked it out myself, but I'm sure that's the case. As far as your other comment about, schools that are blind, there's national organizations for the blind, and they are aware of audio description, and they know that they should be able to get audio description, that they have a legal right under ADA and these other legal statutes, that they should be able to have access through audio description. So, like I say, I'm sure there are people who go to the parks that don't know about it, but I think that is being addressed through these national organizations, definitely. And yeah, how do they get to the park? Most of them differently. You have grandma who's got cataracts now and can't read the panels, can't see what the pictures are, or you're going with a group of friends. But there are people who are blind who manage to get around the world all by themselves. I know of blind people who travel extensively. So it's amazing. They're just people like us, and they manage to get around the world just like we do. Yeah.
So what I meant was, through the websites,
Mhm.
can the in-person audio descriptions that you make available to the people who have visited the sites, could those particular ones be available through the web?
Sure.
Because what
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking that grandma might be sitting at home saying, I can't see anyway, why would I want to go? And so if you can kind of like get the appetite more, that people who can see become more aware of it. But so that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I would imagine the descriptions we're doing, like I was saying, for the outside app,
Mhm.
are probably going to be placed on the website as well, number one. And number two, that app I'm talking about for the inside, anybody can download that. It gives you a whole list of parks, so you can visit any of those parks you want virtually, any of those visitor centers you want through that app, just sitting at home. Anything else? And thank you very much for this opportunity to share one of my very favorite subjects with you.
Thank you, Carol.